Good evening. Welcome to KTJ webinar. Today's topic is counseling. What is counseling and how does it work at KTJ? My name is Suresh Naidu, Head of Secondary in charge of Pastoral Care. I'm delighted today to introduce you to our speaker, Ms. Rachael Tan. Rachael works at KTJ Primary and at KTJ Secondary. In this role, she meets with lots of students and she supports them. With this information, she helps to direct the development of pastoral care at KTJ by informing the school management of matters concerning student welfare. Rachael is a trained and registered counsellor. She's licensed by the Board of Counsellors Malaysia. Today's webinar will take about 30 minutes. The first 20 minutes is for the presentation, and the last 10 minutes for questions and answers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type it into the chat function, and I will read this out for Rachael to answer at the end. With that, I hand over the session to Rachael.
Thank you very much, Suresh, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar with me this evening to learn more about what counseling is and how it works at KTJ. So let me start the presentation. All right. Before I proceed, I would like all of you here to participate in this quick poll over here. It helps me to understand all of you, the participants, better, whether or not you are a parent to KTJ students. And we'll go back to the poll result in a bit. And now let me quickly introduce our KTJ counseling team. I'm Rachael. I work with primary and secondary students at KTJ. We also have Miss Betty in the team who works with our secondary students. Some of you might be wondering, what do we do as counselors? So counselors are actually mental health professionals. Here is a very informative summary by MMHA, the Malaysian Mental Health Association, that tells the differences between the three mental health professionals: counselors, psychiatrists, and clinical psychologists, according to background, primary focus, and approach. I'd like to highlight the primary focus and the approach of counselors. So counselors usually work with individuals who struggle with day-to-day issues. It could be social adjustments, relationships, or career. Different from the other two mental health professionals, counselors do not perform diagnosis nor prescribe medication to our clients. However, we do counseling and psychotherapy. So before I explain further about what counseling is, let's have a quick look at the poll results. Okay, so we can see that we have parent to primary students, we have parent to KTJ secondary student, and parents to non-KTJ students. And all of you are welcome, and I hope all of you have learned something from today's session. So let's move on to the next slide. So what is counseling? Is counseling all about talking to the student and telling them what to do and what not to do? Actually, counseling is a therapeutic process, and these are the keywords. A therapeutic process of helping people to be well through talk and the use of a range of activities. At KTJ, through counseling, the child or young person is encouraged to express his or her feelings and thoughts about a problem or issue so that the person can understand himself or herself better, and therefore identify or improve ways of coping. A very important characteristic of counseling is that it is done in a safe and confidential environment. Some of you might start to wonder, why is confidentiality in counseling so important, and why counseling needs to be secretive? I'm going to explain it to you on the next slide. So according to the counselor professional and ethical standards, the counselors are prohibited from disclosing any information that the client provides, unless we have prior written or verbal consent from the client. So the term client here refers to the person who sees the counselor for counseling. In our case today, it refers to our students or children. As you can see on the slide, confidentiality is essential to the formal counseling process in order to allow the students to open up and share feelings without fear, to allow students to speak freely about issues concerning her or him, and of course to encourage people to come forward for counseling. However, there are a few exceptions to these standards of confidentiality where the counselor may need to disclose or inform a third party about the case. That means the counselor needs to break the confidentiality. The general requirement that counselors keep student information confidential does not apply when a disclosure is needed to protect students or identify others from serious and foreseeable harm, or when legal requirements demand that confidential information must be revealed. I'll pause it for a while and invite Suresh to join us. Suresh, so do you have any questions? Imagine yourself as a parent.
Yes, Rachael, so you mentioned just now in the previous slide that matters concerning counseling is confidential. This slide shows that there are limitations to that aspect. So will the child trust the counseling process and be truthful to the counselor?
Okay. The potential student client will be briefed about the confidentiality and its limitations before starting a counseling session. That means the child will be briefed about what you have just learned. When the counselor has identified a situation where a disclosure is needed, the counselor will first initiate a discussion with the student client to talk about the need for disclosure before taking any action. So the reason for doing this is to maintain the transparency and the trust between the counselor and the student that has been built. The disclosure is done in a progressive, step-by-step manner because we always want to make sure every single decision we make is for the best interest of the child. We always want to make sure that the child has a full understanding of the rationale behind each action, that they feel comfortable, they feel safe and supported at all times. So parents, you might see at this point, it is no longer about the limitations anymore. It's about the trust and the therapeutic relationship between the counselor and the child, and how to make the child feel that he or she is being valued and prioritized over so many other things. Thank you, Suresh, for the question. So now some parents here might have these questions. Will I be notified when my child is seeing a counselor? Or is my consent needed, or whether is my agreement needed for my child to see a counselor? So before I explain further, I would like to invite all of you to take a quick survey here. How many of you have heard about Gillick Competence or Gillick Ruling? So please vote for your answer in the poll over here, and I'll pause for a while to allow the parents here to vote. Okay. So it seems like Gillick Competence is something very new to most of the parents here. So at KTJ, we apply Gillick Ruling in counseling. So what is Gillick Ruling? What is Gillick Competence? Many, but not all, the secondary phase students may be deemed competent under the Gillick Ruling to give consent. And some primary students could be competent under the Gillick Ruling. This means the students have the ability and the maturity to consent to their own counseling without the need for parental permission or knowledge. So at this point, parents, you might understand that under Gillick Ruling, a child's chronological age does not always reflect their ability and maturity to consent. So the student will be offered 1 or 2 initial exploratory sessions with a counselor to outline what is involved in the counseling session, and also to allow the counselor to assess the child's Gillick competence before he or she commits himself or herself to counseling. Whereas for primary students, the initial session is also very important for counselors to encourage them to agree to their parents being approached about their counseling. So the last part of the slide here stated that counseling may go ahead if the counselor assesses the young person to be Gillick competent, even if the parent withholds the consent. That means the parents do not allow or do not agree for the child to see a counselor for counseling. Or if the child is very distressed and unwilling for the counselor or the school to approach the parents. So generally, this is what happened in school. The secondary students will be given an informed consent form to sign. That means that they can give consent to their own counseling sessions without parental permission and knowledge, unless they are deemed incompetent under Gillick Ruling. Whereas in the primary, parental consent is needed for most cases. However, if the primary student is deemed Gillick competent and he or she is unwilling for counselors to approach his or her parents, the counseling may still proceed without parental permission and knowledge. So Suresh, you have questions for me?
Yes. Gillick ruling, as the poll shows, not many people know about that. And it's understandable. So please, can you elaborate for the benefit of our parents and participants today on the Gillick ruling, as in the background of it, how did it come about, what does it state?
All right. So Gillick competence actually refers to a legal case where the original statement at the Gillick case was about the child or young person giving consent to their own medical treatment. And nowadays, the principles of Gillick case has been so widely used to help assess whether a child or adolescent is competent to make a decision about any aspects in their life. So to be competent means that the child or the young person has the maturity, the ability, and the intelligence to make their own decisions and to understand the implications of those decisions. So I will share a handout about Gillick competence at the end of my presentation. And parents, if you're interested to find out more about Gillick competence, feel free to download and have a look.
Rachael, I also have a second question.
Yeah.
Now, some parents might be concerned about this because it sounds like Gillick ruling will be going against the right of the parent to know what's going on with the child. What's your response to that?
All right. And first of all, it's completely normal for parents to feel that way. And actually, Gillick's ruling suggests that children or young people should be encouraged to allow their parents to be informed. However, if the child is assessed to be Gillick competent, and the counselors are not under any duty to inform or to consult the parents throughout the counseling process, especially when the child is distressed and unwilling. Well, unless there is a need for disclosure due to a concern on the child's safety. And that links back to the limitations of confidentiality that we have just discussed earlier. So as counselors, we always look forward to work together with parents in expanding the support system for the child. However, as mentioned earlier, all the steps need to be done in a progressive manner, and all the decisions need to be made for the best interest of the child. Thank you for the questions, Suresh. And let's move on to the next slide. So when can a student or a child see a counselor? I always tell students that there's nothing is too big, is too small for you to share in the counseling room. Students are encouraged to talk to a counselor about any issues that concern them, or at any time that they feel like having someone to talk to or having someone to listen to them. As you can see on the slides here, here are some of the common concerns that the counselors work with the children or young person. Adapting to new situations, any kind of new situations. It could be being new to the school, new to the country, new to online learning, for example. Difficulty coping with emotions, depression, anxiety, and anger. Interpersonal and relationship difficulties with parents, with friends, or even with themselves and others. Health-related concerns, problems with eating, whether or not the child has been eating too much, eating too little, has been restricted in his or her diet, or problems with sleeping, sleeping too little, finding it difficult to fall asleep, and having disturbing dreams, and so on. Academic issues, a lack of motivation, poor concentration, study-related stress, stressful or traumatic experiences, death, harassment, domestic abuse, and bullying. Next, how can a child benefit from counseling? There's so many benefits of counseling, and they all start with the basics: providing safe space, building trust, showing care and reassurance, and more. And it helps the children to explore their feelings and thoughts, help them to look at how they might want things to be different through talking, listening, and the use of a range of activities. Counseling can be an early intervention strategy to prevent deterioration in emotional, behavioral, and social well-being. It enhances a child's self-esteem and ability to cope more effectively. And these three words are highlighted: emotional, behavioral, and social well-being, because these are the three main areas that counselors work with a child or student in counseling. And the last line here in the slide is highlighted in pink, and I hope this lovely color has drawn your attention. I would like to take this opportunity to clarify the common and the usual misunderstanding about counseling that most people have. Is that seeing a counselor does not mean that the child or the person is less than others, weak or poor in spirit. It merely means that the child or the person is capable and willing to understand more about what she or he is experiencing, and is brave enough to seek support, and what more, seeking for professionals counseling support. So I sincerely hope that our parents who are participating in this webinar this evening would want to share the same belief as us. So next, at KTJ, how does a student end up in the counselor's office? There are two ways: self-referral and referral. So self-referral simply means that the students can approach the counselors voluntarily via email or walk-in. And of course, the student can also be referred by anyone within the KTJ community, which includes the teaching staff, non-teaching staff, parents, students, and their refers to their friends, house parents, matrons, safeguarding officers, and etc. As you can see, it is highlighted here at the bottom. A student, however, cannot be forced to see a counselor. We always want students to come to us willingly, otherwise it just defeats the purpose. And I would like to share this. Not all, but most of the referral cases can be challenging because the students might not like the idea of being sent to see someone just because they have problems, or others think that they have problems. So therefore, as counselors, we always ask for the cooperation from the referee or the person who would like to refer the student for counseling, so that we can work together on the best strategy to approach the child or the student. Okay, parents, at this point of a presentation, you might start to think like, hey, I think my child needs counseling help, and what should I do? First and foremost, keep calm, and if the situation allows, you are encouraged to talk to your child about talking to a counselor. Let them know what has raised your concerns. At this point, do not pressure them to tell you everything. Just continue to reassure your child that you will be there whenever they need your support. Once they agree, guide your child to contact the counseling team, or if your child requests for your help, you can contact us on his or her behalf via email. And this is our email address: counseling@ktj.edu.my. So what if all this do not work for the situation that you're having? It's almost impossible for you to initiate such a conversation with your child. Right, so just take a look at this referral procedure. So parents, you are encouraged to approach our KTJ academic staff for a chat about your concerns. So for primary parents, you may consider having a chat with the class teacher or teaching assistant. Whereas for secondary parents, you might be interested to talk to the house parent or tutor. It is always good to have a chat with the teachers or house parents in order to get a better picture of the situation and get to know more about what your child is experiencing. So our academic staff are well trained, and they will provide you the guidance that you need, and they can help to facilitate if a referral to counseling is needed. So although talking to an academic staff is encouraged, parents, you are, however, welcome to contact the KTJ counselors. For whatever reasons you prefer to approach us directly, and you don't want to go through an academic staff, which is fine. And what you have to do is just to write us an email. Okay. And I would also like to take this opportunity to remind our parents here, please do not refer your child for counseling as punishment or disciplinary measure. So let's assume that your child is seeing a counselor. How can you as a parent support him or her? Here are the two keywords to remember, which you might heard heard them already at the beginning of a presentation: confidentiality and sensitivity. Please do not mention or discuss the child with or in front of others, and that includes the family members, siblings, and relatives. So as adults, sometimes we might think it's not a big deal, but we always have to remind ourselves to be sensitive towards how the child might feel, because it is about them, not us. And of course, like what is stated on the slide, do not force a child to share his or her problems. Trust me, when they are ready, they will share the problems with you. Just to have to be patient. Okay, and here are some important reminders to all parents here. Be discreet, show your support and respect privacy, or even though they are very young, they are just a child, that they have the right to enjoy the privacy, and use encouraging statements and words. Tell them how proud you are as the parents, for the fact that they are brave enough to look for someone to help, or for help. All right, so if you are still unsure about what to do, or you have other concerns, feel free to contact the counseling team at counseling@ktj.edu.my. So that's all for me. So now I'm going to share two handouts. One is the introduction to counseling for parents, and that basically covers all the discussions that we just had. And the other one is Gillick Competence. And if you're interested, feel free to download and have a look. So next, it's time for Q&A. So I'd like to remind parents here, if you like to ask questions, just be mindful that to keep your questions general. If your question includes something that can be deemed very personal to you, you are advised to drop me an email instead of asking the questions into that session. So Suresh.
Right. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel, so in one of the slides, you mentioned that the reasons why a student may see a counselor. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed any trends that particularly comes up in trends that come up in the primary school, or trends that come up in the secondary schools?
Okay. Before I share, I would like to clarify that I'm going to share more about the students who come to us voluntarily, because the referred case would be a bit different. So for primary, I would say the students who came to me voluntarily usually raise the issues about relationships with their friends, with their peers, or family members, siblings, for example. Whereas in the secondary, the students usually come to the counselors for a wider range of issues, like what you have seen on the slide. Difficulty coping with emotions, interpersonal and relationship difficulties, health-related concerns, and academic issues. So in general, if I would like to summarize, I would say that the teenagers or the adolescents are mostly affected by mental health issues. And that usually links to many other issues that they're facing in their lives. So parents, let us know if you would like to learn more about mental health issues among adolescents, and we might organize another webinar on this topic in the near future. Suresh.
So Rachel, thanks for that. And you mentioned mental health. Mm-hmm. It's I've been hearing some parents saying that, what is mental health? Mm-hmm. It never happened when we were growing up, when we were in school. Mm-hmm. Why is this a new thing? Is this a new phenomenon? Is this real? Should we really be concerned about this? What is your response to that?
Okay, about mental health, I would say that it's a very common reaction for a person who learns about mental illnesses or mental health issues. And the first question they will ask is why, and what are the causes? Is it real? They start to get skeptical towards mental health issues or mental illnesses. I would say that the emotional difficulties and the psychological symptoms that a person is going through, or the person is experiencing, are real, and he or she is truly suffering. So how a person reacts and understands or comprehends the surrounding environment are due to many factors. It could be how they grew up, what are the social expectations, and what are the cultures that they are being exposed to, and so on. So we have to accept that our children are now growing up in a very different environment compared to our times, where mental illnesses or mental health were not being widely discussed. Needless to say that the mental health was being dealt with very, very differently 10, 20, 30 years ago. So to summarize, the point I'm going to make today is that the emotional and psychological symptoms a person experiences are real and they exist, even though others may find it difficult to understand or had never experienced before. So as a counselor or as a person who works with children and adolescents and teenagers in school, we rather not to miss on a child who is asking for help. So we won't think that they are faking it or not, and that's not our first concern. And our first reaction is we attend to him or her, and we provide the support that the child needs. Suresh.
With this current lockdown and some parents are finding it difficult being at home and their children finding it difficult being at home, and the home environment become quite stressed. What can parents do? What should parents be aware of in supporting their children during this lockdown period?
Okay, this is one of the commonly asked questions, especially when we are all hit by COVID-19 and affected by MCO or lockdown. Parents, I believe you have at some point already come across many articles talking about tips on how to manage situations at home during this challenging time. And yet, still, there are many parents are struggling. So I think the reasons behind this situation is that there's no one solution or just a list of 10, 20 tips that work for every family, because each family has a different situation compared to other family. So in general, for today's session, I would suggest parents to help your child to keep a routine. That includes learning, having fun, physical exercise, and rest. A lot of patience is needed here because the time that is needed for a child to adapt or to get used to a new routine during this time is different from one another. And the other thing that I would like to encourage the parents to do is to take this opportunity to have conversations about feelings and emotions with their children. Sometimes it's okay for children to know how we, the adults, feel. And that helps them to understand that the pandemic now actually affects everyone, regardless if you are a child or an adult. And having such conversations like this also reassures the child that he or she is not facing the changes alone, but with others in the family. So parents, if you have other concerns during this period of time, or if you are looking for more specific suggestions to the situations that you are currently having right now, feel free to contact the counseling team so that we can support you further. Suresh.
Sorry, Rachel, something happened there. So, Rachel, if a parent, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you right now.
Right. So, if a parent wants to refer, wants a child, his or her child, to talk to a counselor, but the child refuses to, and what would your advice be to that parent?
Okay. First of all, we need to find out why the child refuses to talk to the counselor. There are many reasons. It could be that the child is skeptical towards counseling, the child is shy, or the child thinks that he doesn't have an issue, but the parents think that he does. So my advice to the parents is that to contact the counselors directly so that we can provide further guidance after learning more details about the case. It is also advisable for parents to not inform your child about you contacting a counselor at this point until we have developed a better plan for the case.
Okay. Right, Rachel, I think we're reaching the 30-minute time period now. So we have reached the end of today's webinar. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everybody for your participation. A recording of this webinar will be available later on our YouTube page. Please feel free to check it out. Let me show you something else. So just a reminder of our upcoming webinars in the month of June under Pastoral Care. On the 3rd of June, we'll be presenting a webinar on safeguarding. What does the school do? What does KTJ do in order to provide a safe environment for your children? That includes employment of staff, practice, reporting procedures, and the actions we take to make sure that the environment is safe. On the 10th of June, we have a webinar on sleep and teenagers, particularly with parents who often question why their children, teenage children, are not sleeping. There is also a session for primary students at the same time, and date. Please sign up for that. On the 15th of June, we will be addressing sex education for 15 to 18-year-olds. What do they need to know? What do parents need to know about 15 to 18-year-olds and the challenges they face in this area? On the 22nd of June, we are addressing a topic that many parents ask us about: the use of mobile devices in secondary school and at home. What can parents do to monitor their children's use of mobile devices? Or is it wrong? Is it wrong to use it in education? Is it wrong to use it in school? Is it wrong to use it at home? What is the right procedure? What should be the right level of education in that area? On the 29th of June, we have a talk about on supporting the children's learning at home. In 5 weeks' time, we'll be starting our midterm break, our end of term break. And the children will be at home for about 4 weeks. So what can parents do in order to support the ongoing learning at home for their children? So these are the upcoming webinars. Please sign up. It'll be very useful, and we'll be pleased to see you there. If you have further questions or suggestions on the topics that you'd like us to cover, please feel free to contact us by replying to the email that you received for this webinar, or by contacting us through our website, www.ktj.edu.my. So thank you once again for attending this webinar, and goodbye. Good evening.